Great to have you with us today, and yeah, it's been a funny week, hasn't it? We had all expected and hoped for a live service today, but yeah, a few things have been messed up, haven't they, by what's been happening. Our dinner groups haven't really been able to happen. We're going to start lunches today, which would have been fantastic. We had one Sunday night reflection service, and now we'll have to just put them on hold and see what happens in the future. But we've got a couple of things planned in the coming weeks that we really hope we can do, but we'll see what happens. We've got a trivia night, we've got a Sharing Hope dinner. There's just a number of other things that we've got on the go that we hope we can have. But it made me think of Mary Magdalene, and when Jesus died, Mary and all of the disciples were really struggling to know what happened to Jesus. And Jesus seemed to be absent. He was gone, he was dead, and Mary was by the tomb. And she was crying because not only had Jesus died, but she had gone there and they had taken the body away, or so it seemed. And Jesus appeared to her and said, or made it clear that it was him. And Mary said these wonderful words. She says, "I have seen the Lord," as she went back to the disciples. And I just hope that today, as we share this service, or that in some way you'll be able to say, "I have seen the Lord." And it's great too that it was her testimony as she went back to the disciples and told them what had happened. She was the testimony that we hang on to today, that she had seen the Lord, and so can we. So maybe there are ways that from our service today, maybe there are ways in your walk with God that you'll be able to see the Lord and be a witness of that to others, as a way to move forward, as a way to see the Lord in the midst of struggle, in the midst of loneliness, in the midst of all kinds of challenges that we are facing right now. So we'd love to share with this service with you today. We're looking forward to hearing from Dave in a little while, and to having some worship together. So let's worship together, and after the first song, Megan is going to bring a children's talk, if you would like to bring the children around.
If you do what I do, you sing around the house. So we hope that you will be able to join from wherever you are watching this.
What gift of grace is Jesus my Redeemer? There is no more for heaven now to give. He is my joy, my righteousness and freedom, my steadfast love, my deep and boundless peace. To
morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here in the building on a Sunday morning, even if I am talking to a camera once again. Our kids' story this week is a new story, and it's called Quinn's Promise Rock. Quinn was a thoughtful little owl who always had a lot of questions. One night, Quinn and her father went flying together. As they soared through the forest searching for some dinner, Quinn had a sudden scary thought. "Daddy," she asked. "Yes, my little owl? What if I get lost? What if you dive and I don't notice? What if you get too far ahead of me and I can't find you? You fly so quietly. What if—" Quinn's father was smiling. He turned away slowly and started flying toward a mountain. Quinn followed him. Why wasn't her father saying anything? Quinn flapped her wings harder and harder as they flew up, 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 and she started to breathe heavier. Where were they going? Her father circled around a huge stone on top of the mountain and then perched on it. Quinn landed and puffed hard as she tried to catch her breath. "Daddy," she panted, "why did we come way up here?" Her father lifted his wing and pointed toward the forest far below. "Do you see that tree way down there?" he asked. Quinn nodded. "Do you recognize it?" Quinn's bright owl eyes looked keenly at the tree, and then she blurted, "That's our tree. That's where our nest is." Her father nodded and said, "This mountain will always be here. It never moves, and it will always show you the way to get home." Quinn, God is like this rocky mountain. God is always here. He never changes, and he will never leave. He will show you the way you should go. Quinn nodded thoughtfully. Suddenly, she felt a drop on her beak, then another drop on her head. Her father spread his wings and started flying back down the mountain. Quinn followed. The rain started to come down faster, and the wind came in gusts. It pushed Quinn's little owl body this way and that, and she became frightened. Cold water poured off her feathers, and she could barely see her father through the raindrops. Her father slowed down and then landed inside a tiny cave on the side of the mountain. Quinn landed beside him and shook the water off her feathers. Her father lifted a wing, and Quinn snuggled underneath it to warm up. As the storm rolled on, her father hugged her close and said, "This cave is a safe place. It protects us from the wind and from the rain." Quinn, God is like this rocky cave. God can protect you during the scariest times in life. When you feel afraid, he's right there, just like this cave, and you can take shelter in him. Eventually, the storm stopped and the sky cleared. The stars came out, and Quinn and her father started off again under the shining moon. They flew silently through the night, sometimes swooping down to eat, but mostly just flying side by side. Just as Quinn was starting to get quite tired, her father dove toward the ground and landed right on the forest floor. Quinn landed beside him and looked up at him with wide, wondering eyes. Quinn's father picked up a little rock with his talon and gave it to her. Then he looked into Quinn's eyes and said, "If you tuck this rock into your feathers, you can carry it everywhere you go. You will feel it hard against your body." Quinn, God is like this tiny rock. Even though he's big like a mountain and safe like a cave, you can also carry him everywhere you go. God is always with you. Quinn's eyes grew even bigger. So if I get lost or scared, I can feel my little rock and remember that God is with me. That's right, my thoughtful little owl. God will show you the way you should go. He will be a safe place, and he will always be with you. The sun began to rise, and Quinn tucked the little rock into a safe place in her feathers. As she and her father flew home, she could hardly wait to tell her mum about this strange and wonderful night. Best of all, she would show her the little promise rock.
Good morning. Am I being instructed to move over this way? The muso's right. There you go. Well, hello everyone. Let me just get my stuff up. And thank you to all the sound crew and everyone that was able to get all this together. I've been informed that it is working, that people can see this at home, so that's a testament to a lot of people doing a lot of hard work, so thank you. Today we're continuing our sermon series looking at apologetics. And apologetics is commonly referred to as the defence of our faith. And it's one of those things, I don't really like that phrase. In some parts of the world, that's really applicable, where we do need to constantly defend our faith. But then there are other parts like Australia, Melbourne, eastern suburbs, where we're not commonly required to really staunchly defend our faith. Instead, we're just more often than not required to explain our faith. And so apologetics and what we've been trying to do with this series is to help people navigate conversations about faith. And so hopefully this does that as well today. So today's specific topic is, why does the Old Testament God seem so different to the New Testament God? And it's a real cracker of a question. Before I went to Bible college, I would have asked this question, and in many ways I do still. This God can seem so different. As the God of creation, Old Testament, fiery images on mountains, all these things can seem so different to the figure of Jesus. And so we get a very different angle of who God is in different parts of Scripture. So when I was looking at the Old Testament at Bible college, my eyes were opened. I began to be able to see how this God is not so different, despite the fact that he may appear different at face value. And so this actually leads me to my first point. If you don't know much about the Bible or theology or anything, you can study. At MST, my Bible college, about a third of the people in my classes are people my age or younger. So they're usually people that want to go into ministry or theology, or they're like me and they just want to know more and had a bit of free time. We make up about a third of the cohort. And then there's a third who are middle-aged, thereabouts, parents whose kids don't need as much care anymore. All of a sudden they have a bit of free time. Great, I have enough time to do a unit of study. That's generally a third as well. And then there's another third of people who are newly retired, who finally have a chance to really grapple with a degree in one form or another. So, typically only a third of the people at Bible college are my age or younger. And that means that it doesn't matter if you haven't studied in 20, 30, 40 years. It doesn't matter if you've dropped out of school in year 9. It doesn't matter if you always struggled with assignments or if you used to be really, really good at them but haven't done them for decades. Bible colleges are designed for you to be able to, grasp this material. They don't design them for academics. They design them for everyday people. So I really encourage you guys to explore Bible college. It's not just Bible study. It's also, if you've wanted to know more about, the Holy Spirit or, the spiritual side of our faith, there are units that look at that and engage with that material. If you want to know more about specific, languages, biblical languages, you can do those things. You can do things from diplomas all the way through to masters or PhDs. Like you can do, or even smaller than diplomas, just individual units. So over the course of apologetics, as Pete said last week, it's impossible for us to be able to answer these questions in 20 minutes. However, let it be an opportunity for you to start thinking, well, I've got a bit of free time now. Maybe I actually do have it in me to do a unit. Go and have a conversation with a Bible college near you. There are many around, and they're all pretty good. But yeah, so that's point number one. If you don't know, and if you feel like we're not answering questions well, work it out for yourself. Don't rely on the people at the front all the time, as wise as we are. And that leads on into point 2. I wouldn't have even been able to begin to grapple this topic if I hadn't gone to Bible college. So the question though, why does the God of the Old Testament seem so different to the God of the New Testament? Is one which I would have struggled to answer. But the reality is, the more I study, the more I actually see the similarities. And so I could easily say that God is actually extremely similar and extremely consistent. And there are ways in which we can look at that. And there are 2 themes that the Bible has. The Bible actually has many themes, but 2 themes that the Bible consistently explores are the themes of covenant and relationship. And they show us how God is consistent. So we'll briefly explore them. So the theme of covenant, which I think I've spoken on previously, looks at promises that God has made to people, largely in the Old Testament. And these promises are, well, they're more than just, shake your hands. These are sacred agreements. And covenants are so sacred to God, God never breaks them. In fact, that's where the name Yahweh, one of the meanings behind the name Yahweh, is covenant-keeping, relational God. So throughout the Old Testament, you'll have passages that refer to the Lord. They'll say, the Lord did this, or the Lord did that. If it is spelt capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, that is referring to Yahweh, the relational God, the covenant-keeping God. So in the Old Testament, in this Israelite narrative, one of the most common ways they refer to God is the covenant keeper. So that tells you a little bit about their relationship with God, that God is the promise keeper. And also, when you begin to scratch under the surface, you begin to realize why sometimes they had a bit of a misunderstanding of who God was. He wasn't necessarily a God to be obeyed or to seek deep relationship with. He was just the promise keeper. And so you can see how some of the troubles sort of happened. There are many different covenants, to get back on track. Way back in the beginning, you have the covenant of Adam and Eve, and some people reckon that's not really a covenant. I reckon it is. I reckon it ticks the boxes. Basically, there is an agreement made between God and humanity, which is, hey, look, check out this amazing creation. Be part of nurturing this creation. But there's always a condition. The condition was, you've got to trust me. You've got to trust that I know what I'm doing. And so when humanity chooses its own way, chooses autonomy, chooses self-reliance, of course, that relationship is broken. It's pretty consistently broken by humanity. That's another mini theme in the theme of covenant, is that humans are very, very good at breaking their side of the covenant, and God is eternally faithful. And then a bit later on, you have the covenant of Noah, which is a similar story. Hey, Noah, this is the deal. If you trust me, you can be part of the recreative process. And so Noah does, and hey presto. So that's a pretty successful one by and large. And then you get to the covenant of Abram and Sarah, or Sarai, Abraham and Sarah. And that's when you get things start to really unravel in terms of, human faithfulness. I don't know if this is actually a prevailing theory in theology, but I kind of view the story before Abraham as sort of the prologue. In Lord of the Rings, how they've got the prologue at the beginning of the Fellowship, where there's whole wars and there's a whole story and everything, and it takes 10 minutes of the movie just to set up the movie. I kind of view Genesis a bit like that. So there's the creation narrative, and then there's the Noah narrative and everything, and all the things that go on there. And that's just, to me, I'm not saying this is an actual thing, but it might be, that to me just feels like the prologue. And then the story of the Israelites begin with Abraham and leading in that direction. And that just is kind of the way I see it. So we have this covenant theme with Abraham, which is the promise that, your descendants will outnumber the stars. And we also see here, it's a really important thing to notice here, that there is no Judaism, there is no Christianity, there's no firm theology in these sections of the Old Testament. There is simply relationship. And that is the second point of, or one of the second major themes of the Old Testament that matches with the New, is the theme of relationship. God always seeks relationship first, always seeks engagement first. When we get a bit further along in the Old Testament, we get to Mount Sinai, so Moses has led the people out of Egypt, and there's the Mosaic covenant, and so the covenant of Moses and God. And then that transforms at Sinai into the covenant of the Israelite people and God. Basically, God leads them out of Egypt, and they get to the mountain, and Moses and God have a bit of a chat. And God says, "Great, done, sorted. I said I would do this, and I've done it." And Moses says, "Yep, thank you." And then God says, "By the way, you guys can do what you want now, but I've actually got a plan." And then he extends the invitation. Do you want to be part of this greater plan? So already the reward was given. Their freedom was given without obligation. And then God says, "By the way, I've got a plan and I want you to be part of it." So there, the invitation is extended into this covenant relationship with the Israelite people. And then there's continuing covenants as a covenant of David, which looks at the idea of kingship, which is fulfilled finally with Jesus, a literal descendant of the line of David. And so there's some amazing other elements of covenant. But essentially, the theme of covenant is a major theme in the Old Testament that leads to the New Testament. And so we see with Jesus, much of what Jesus does, including his death, is a fulfillment of covenant obligation. One of the major things with the covenant of Abraham, this is a slight tangent, so just bear with me, is that when the covenant promises were broken, and this was a common political and diplomatic way of structuring agreements between kingdoms and vassals and lords and everything, is that if a vassal broke their covenant obligations to their overlord, then they were in trouble. They were in real strife, and they could expect retribution. With the covenant of Abraham, Abraham and God says, "I will take the punishment. I will take the fall should this thing fall apart." And so we often see that ultimately fulfilled. One of the things Jesus is doing on the cross is fulfilling that covenant promise to take the punishment on behalf of a humanity that failed to uphold that covenant. So there's much more happening there as well, but that's just one thing, and which is really cool, because when you explore the Old Testament, when you begin to unravel remove the mist that surrounds all these Old Testament things, what you do understand becomes so much richer, because you learn so much more about why things happen the way they do. So that's the first theme of covenant. The second theme of relationship is also another way we can see God's consistency. We see in the most human element of God, obviously, is Jesus. We see Jesus act in an incredibly relational way. He always seeks relationship. Wherever he goes, he seeks intimate relationship. And it's often profound. There are often times when I do cry as I read the New Testament, because just the way he seeks relationship is so breathtaking. But of course, God was doing that all along. And in the Old Testament, those stories occur as well. One of the earliest stories is the story of Hagar and Ishmael. That story really genuinely brings me to tears when I read it. So there's Abraham and Sarah, and they had this agreement with God, this covenant promise that, Abraham's descendants will outnumber the stars. And so he's really psyched for that, but of course nothing's happening. And so, what do? Well, they do what Adam and Eve did, and they take the plan and they try to adapt it, their own way. And so Hagar, the slave, is brought before Abraham, and she gives birth to Ishmael. So a woman that had absolutely no ability to make her own decisions, had this situation forced upon her. But she normally does, what her master commands. She brings forth a son, and so so for her, she thinks, well, okay, at least I've done what I was required to do. But no, it's not the covenant plan. And so God has a few stern words with Abraham and says, all right, we're going to get back on track here. You need to trust me. And so, to his credit, he does, and him and Sarah do. And obviously, that story continues. But Hagar and Ishmael, well, they're an inconvenience now, aren't they? Through no fault of their own, completely powerless in the situation, they've become a problem. And so they're cast out. And what does God do? In this story, we see the plan being acted on with the important characters, and then a slave over here whose a problem is cast out, but God does not forsake her. He says, I see you. And so he keeps them safe when it was almost certain death for them. So, in fact, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, I haven't checked this, Ishmael means God sees you. Is that right? Yeah. Yep, double check that at home. But yeah, I believe the name Ishmael directly relates to the fact that God cared for and provided for Hagar and Ishmael. So we see this deep intimacy in many times in the Old Testament. One of the first times is with Hagar and Ishmael. God seeing insignificant, unimportant people. And so there is great consistency between this God of the Old Testament and the God of the New when you begin to look at great themes. So you step back and you see the covenant theme, God is working consistently. This is how God is working. This is how the plan is unfolding. And then you see, the theme of relationship. God is consistently seeking relationship with people. Okay, great, wonderful. Dave, you've answered the question, thanks. Of course, I haven't answered the question, really. See, this is where I started to get a bit nervous, because this would be a good answer if this was a theological essay. If I've got a topic at Bible college, I can hand that in and I can expect a good mark for that. If I didn't, I'd be having words. But the reality is, this is apologetics. So I don't know about your mates, but my mates aren't going to ask me this question. I don't go to a party and someone comes up to me and says, well, David, why does the God of the Old Testament seem so different to the God of the New Testament? They're not going to even know what the Old Testament and the New Testament is. Why would they know that? But I do have friends approaching me at parties, consistently asking me questions because I'm the token Christian guy. And like with the Who is God sermon a few weeks ago, where I said that there are different ways that people ask this question, there are different ways people are going to ask this question. And so some of the ways are, how could this God of love, this Jesus, the New Testament God, destroy the world in a flood? How could this God of love condone slavery? How could this God of love advocate for genocide and war? So all of a sudden, the questions actually become a lot more pointed. It's still the same question. The question is asking about the inconsistencies between this God of the New Testament and the God of the Old Testament, but they're much more pointed and they're much more difficult to answer. Unless you think you do have the answers. I'll say I'm struggling with some of these ones. I can answer the slavery one pretty well because I've explored that topic at Bible college and I understand what's going on, at least to a bachelor's degree level of what's happening with the Levitical laws and what God is trying to do with these covenant, with the covenant of Moses, and what these laws are meant to lead to and what they're meant to try and do. And that's an interesting conversation in its own right. But I kind of understand why those laws are written the way they are. They might have been misinterpreted later on, and the Israelites were not good at following them. But there was a plan with that law. So I could grapple that question with someone at a party. And then there's the next one, like the whole, Noah flood one. I could still have a conversation with someone about that at a party, but I'd be on a bit more shaky theological ground. I haven't, given as much study to that as I have to the slavery question. And then there's the third question, which was the real one I struggled with, which was, how can God advocate for genocide and war? And of course, the classic narrative is the Israelite conquest of the Promised Land and the killing of every man, woman, and child in towns and cities that they came across, and that God actually was disappointed and angry that they weren't, completely committing genocide. And of course, there's inconsistencies in that text as well, and so there's a lot of conjecture about what's really going on there. But I struggle with that one. And some of you at home might have answers to that. And you might go, well, Dave, this was the plan, this is what they were doing, yada, yada. Okay, and that's fine. If that works for you, that works for you. I've never actually found an answer, a neat answer, that apologetics often calls for. Apologetics calls for neat answers that we can then give to people when they ask us questions. Haven't found a neat answer for this one that I actually am comfortable with. But maybe that's just me. But I actually think a lot of people here are going to struggle with that question. So, yeah, I guess it's just one of those things that no matter who you are, no matter how much study you've done, there are going to be things that stump you. Now, the good thing about this is I was actually having a chat with my small group about this earlier in the week, and I was just talking about my problem here. I've done as you can all readily agree, this is a terrific sermon, but how do I wrap it up? And because I was faced with this problem. And it was Matt, I think, who said, well, people at TLC at least, and people in Australian society generally, have a pretty good bull detector, right? We know when someone's, talking trash, talking rubbish. So it's really important to be able to say, I don't know. And then Tim said, and if you say you don't know, the follow-up to that is, but I'll try and find out for you. And this is important when it comes to apologetics conversations. So once again, I could have a real crack at the slavery one and the flood one, right? I could probably have a conversation with someone about that. And I'm not going to provide my own points of view on that, because the points of view are so divergent on this, even in Christian circles, about what's really going on, the literal versus the metaphorical, and all of the different questions that can come out of that. So I'm not going to give you my points of view, because I'm guaranteed it will annoy just as many people as it will encourage. But we all have different points of view. But I could have a real crack at that question. But I know if a lot of my friends approach me and say, Dave, what's the deal here? And I say, I don't know, one of two things will happen. They'll either go, oh, you don't know anything about your faith, you're all just, in which case, well, the conversation wasn't worth having to begin with anyway, because it wasn't a conversation that actually talked about, it wasn't going to be an equal conversation. It was going to be an accusatory, argument. They weren't there to genuinely be curious. They were there because they actually were wanting to pick a fight. And okay, well, fair enough. I haven't had that conversation. I've avoided that. But then there's the other side of things where if they go, okay, cool, yeah, let me know. They will respect you more when you come back to them and say, I've actually given it a bit of thought, I've looked at a few different angles, and this is what I think is happening. This is what I think is going on. Then, once again, you're more likely to have a meaningful conversation that could lead somewhere. So once again, we're lucky enough here that apologetics is not so much the defence of our faith as it is an opportunity for us to have faith conversations with people. So it's okay to say you don't know, but hopefully this sermon has either encouraged you guys to seek more independent learning yourself through Bible colleges, and also hopefully, we can understand a little bit better about themes, the theme of covenant, theme of relationships that point to God's consistency in the Old and New Testaments, even though it can appear that they're divergent, they are remarkably consistent. But it's also okay to say, I don't know, because it's always going to be a question, no matter who you are, where you're going to scratch your head and go, yeah, I don't know about that one, but I will do what I can to find out. Thank you. Go well, guys. Go well, guys.
Thank you, Dave. Lots of good things to think, and a good challenge to go and read Scripture and to seek God and to have greater understanding. This song is a beautiful song that talks about and thinking about Dave's message is really about even in the midst of the unknown and the things that we can't answer, that our God is an amazing God and He is good and He is faithful. We'll sing this. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake
of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God.
God is indeed so good, isn't he? And even though we might find times hard, God is really good, and we can goodness of God. And one of the things my family tease me about is that I like really depressing movies, and one of the reasons for that is I can always get into the life of someone else who's got something worse happening in their life than it's happening to me, and it's a way for us to look outside of ourselves. And so can I encourage you this week, even though our world has shrunk to maybe 5 kilometres and might even be within our 4 walls, can I encourage you this week to pray for 3 things. Pray for something local, something national, and something international. Locally, we've got people in our church who've had surgery in the last few weeks. We've got those other people who have got long-term illnesses. You could pray for our church and for our leadership as we work out what to do in these challenging and changing times. Or just in your community, one of your neighbours. Or nationally, we can pray for our leaders as they try to navigate some of the challenges of COVID that we're facing, or for the homelessness that people are experiencing, or refugees, or international students who are really in trouble in times like this. And then internationally, there's just so much happening internationally, isn't it? We are so lucky here in Australia to have what we have. So every day this week, can I challenge you to pray for something local, national and international as a way to just reach out to God. And it was great that Dave was able to share about that relationship that we have with God is something that we can take with us, whether we're stuck in our four walls or whether we're able to get out and about. If you are struggling and need something, please call us at the church. Our food bank is still operating, but if there's other ways that you need help, please call us. We'd love to hear from you. And now just to finish off with just a couple of verses from 1 Peter chapter 5 as a way to encourage us this week. And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm and steadfast. To him be the power forever and ever. Amen. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll just be led in a final song. God bless.
These words are words that remind us of the Old Testament and of the New Testament and the words of God that we hold.
Holy words long preserved for our walk in this world. They resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Words of life, words of hope, give us strength, help us cope in this world where we roam. Ancient words will guide us home. Ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Holy words of faith handed down to this age, come to us through sacrifice. Oh, heed the faithful words of Christ. Ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Martyr's blood stains each page. They have died for this faith. Hear them cry through the years. Heed these words and hold them dear. Ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Oh, let the ancient words impart.
Amen. God bless. Stay in touch, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you. Thank you.